Thank you for having me here, the team from CPI. Talal ended it at an absolute right note for me because he spoke about a decelerated cash cycle where banks are wary to extend loans and stuff. So before I start speaking, just to know the audience better, how many bankers in the room? How many bankers in the room? Okay, we have few, that's great. And how many corporates or business houses who avail credit facilities from banks or who have availed in the past or are planning to avail credit facilities from banks? Just to understand. Okay, so we have a mix of both. What I'm going to try and do is, I have exactly like a five slides, yeah, but I'm just going to share a few of my thoughts, which are very simple and what I think should be good pointers for businesses when you are looking to have relationships with banks. So we all know these basic requirements, right? You need audited balance sheets, you need a track record in the business, you need to have a good market check and stuff. But when you are going through a difficult cycle, you need to stand out as a business. Does everyone agree? Yeah, because as Talal mentioned, during the good cycle, it's easier to avail debt and grow your business. But when you're going through a phase like corporates and companies went through in the recent past, banks are looking for businesses which can stand out. Yeah? So you need to be able to demonstrate how your business model actually is strong enough to sustain this cycle. So based on our experience, when we've interacted with a few relationship managers across, these are just basic pointers. I think these three things have become very critical right now in the market. How committed are the promoters in the country? Because we all know of so many default and skip cases that the banks went through. So with the corporates, what is the on-ground business model? How strong is the business model locally within the country? And this is especially true when it comes to SME businesses. And a clean banking track record. So you have your Etihad Credit Bureau or your central bank reports, which the banks have access to look at what kind of businesses they can lend to. Now, this is just the basic. Now, what I want to share with you are a few pointers on managing your bank debt. Okay, so before we start, what do you think happened to this guy? What does this expression say? Okay, he's worried about his heavy charges, so it's a worrisome expression. Please, sorry? Oh, he doesn't have cash. So that's also a possibility. Let's hear some thoughts, yeah, let's make it a little more interactive because when I go ahead, I'm sure there'll be more questions. His money is out of sight, it is sitting on his head, he can't see it, that's valid. Sorry? Oh, it's waiting for him at home, okay. Oh, okay, that's trending these days. That's possible. That's a very valid point. He might be losing what he's earning and he's worried about that. So I think everyone agrees that he's worried. I was once giving a presentation where the seating was theater style, yeah? So someone from the back row actually said he just saw his wife's credit card bill. So no offense meant, it was just one of the comments that I heard. So yeah, I think in today's times, you have to be very careful, both the finance managers and the promoters, when managing your debts, because you don't want to be over-leveraged in a slow business environment. So yes, there are chances of getting worried. My first point is the interest cost. The speaker before also mentioned about this. SMEs pay a very high interest cost. what I like to say is that this interest cost is a direct perception of the risk that the bank faces. The pricing that the bank charges is based on their perception of the risk. Now, does the perception differ from bank to bank? Yes? Everyone agrees that it will differ from bank to bank? Yeah? So, you will find in a lot of cases an exact same business getting differential pricing from two different banks in a country. Make sense? Yeah, very simple. But it's profound. I'll give you a very classic example. I had a client who owned 2 buildings in Ajman in the Northern Emirates. Yeah? He was trying to raise finance. He goes to Bank A. Bank A says, property in Ajman, we're not very comfortable. We'll give you 50% of the value of the property at a, say just for an example, at a 7% interest. Yeah? He goes to Bank B. Bank B says, property in Ajman, no problem. You get 70% of the value of the property at 6%. Does it make sense to us as business owners? Those who have not dealt with bank debts or not had the experience before, it doesn't. But it's the perception of the risk which matters. So knowing what the bank's appetite is and knowing what the banks prefer in the current market environment would also help you to understand the kind of interest cost that you're going to pay and also the kind of bank that you would like to work with. Am I making sense? Yeah, I'll take you through a few more examples. So basically what I'm saying is selecting the bank which understands your business model and more importantly has the appetite for that kind of a business model. Yeah? Because especially if you look at the SME sector, not all banks would have appetite for the same kind of a business. So if you look at hospitality, F&B, retail kind of business, banks are more favorable to it. But if you want to construct a building or a developer is looking to finance, maybe not all banks are, I'm not saying no one will do it, but maybe not all are favorable to it. So you need to identify institutions and look out and discuss with people to find out what's the appetite, so you're better placed. Similarly for Africa, I mean, I look at a lot of companies, even in the SME sector, who trade a lot with Africa over here. Yeah? But the African risk appetite within the banks could be low. One of the most global banks does not have a single branch in Africa, so they may not be able to take risk on that. Yeah? So how you can manage or optimize your interest cost, probably reduce is not the right word, it should have been optimize, is you discuss and find out and approach a bank which understands your business model and has the appetite for that business model. Yeah, that's the key takeaway that I had to share from this slide. Going ahead, whenever you're talking to banks, the way you structure your bank facility is equally important, right? So most of the banks here would charge a cash margin for you on your facilities. So you need to understand what is the optimum level of cash margin that you need to pay, because whatever you can reduce on your cash margins, it's good for the business. So if, as an entrepreneur, you've invested in property here, you make a decent rental return on that property, you might consider giving that property as a collateral instead of keeping a cash margin with the bank. Does that make sense? Because you're getting, so I'm not advocating you to buy property and then put it with the banks, yeah? I'm going the reverse way. I'm saying you've already made a decision to have a property here. Then instead of putting a fixed deposit with the bank, you could also consider putting that property up as a collateral. And in fact, I know a lot of banks here would actually like to have a property as a collateral while granting credit facilities. So it helps you get better return on your money, basically. Who is this gentleman in the pic? Any guesses? Sorry? Richard Branson, okay, that's the first time I've heard this one. Oh, okay, I'll leave that one out. Donald Trump. He's actually your finance manager or your chief accountant. Yeah, by nature, they're very boring people, you might say. But they need to have a life. They need to be on the beach. They need to have some holidays. And having too many bank accounts or bank facilities to deal with is not good for your business, not healthy for the business, and not good for your finance manager's life as well. The third one is most important. I mean, you can decide the priority, yeah? But you need to get the finance manager alive. I'll tell you an example. I have seen corporates here with a turnover of 50 to 60 million dirhams having 7 to 8 bank loans. It becomes very difficult to manage, and despite the best of intentions, the promoters could end up making mistake in managing those 7 to 8 relationships or 9 relationships. It's not healthy for the business to have those kind of relationships for that size of the business. Also, the reverse is true as well, yeah? Maybe just having one bank in your portfolio is risky as well, yeah? You may end up having a concentration risk, just as you speak about your customers' diversification and having a spread of customers. So again, what is the optimum number of banking relationships that you want to have? You need to think about that, yeah? But going out and taking 8 or 9 banks for a certain size of business, not at all a good idea. Usage of funds for the purpose that it was borrowed. I'm sure everyone in the room would agree that you should not borrow short-term money and invest it in a long-term asset, correct? How many of you have seen the reverse affecting a business? Someone takes a term loan and then uses it for his working capital, or a business loan kind of a product which is available in the market. Do you think that can affect your business? A typical working capital facility is available on a rotating basis, right? You use the working capital facility for 120, 180 days, you settle it with the bank, and you draw down the full amount again. Making sense? Yeah? But when you take a term loan and start using it for your working capital, or a business loan which is 48 months or 36 months, and start using it, at the end of the second year, when you've repaid half of your loan, you will suddenly realize that that working capital has gone out of the system because you've gone and settled the bank. Hello? No? Or yes? At the end of the second year, I'll repeat this. At the end of the second year, you will suddenly realize that 50% of the capital which was available to you to use in your business has been settled and repaid to the banks. Yeah? So suddenly you will feel that you're short of working capital. And typically what happened also in this market in the last few years, because that went out, you borrowed from another bank now to settle this. Then you borrowed from a third bank to settle this. And it becomes a cycle. And you get into a trap. Yeah? So yes, don't use short-term money and invest in a long-term asset like a property or a real estate or whatever. But at the same time, the reverse is also true, which many a times might get skipped from your notice because it's easy money available and you might use it for your business. But then if you're borrowing for a certain period, make sure that you're able to return that money and still survive. Yeah? Because your business gets used to a certain working capital level. Talal pointed out very efficiently that you had 73 and 5 or $78 left in your cash flow to reinvest. Your business gets used to that cash flow cycle. And when you start repaying the term loan installments, you may get stuck. So when you speak to your banks for facilities, you also need to structure the right product that you are trying to avail of. And discussing with the banks will help you a lot because they will be able to suggest you what product suits your business. Yeah? But always discuss and find out how the product works. So take an example of a service industry, yeah, whether it is IT or advertising or logistics, service providers. What's the working capital for a service provider? Where does his money go? Salaries and rent, yeah? Predominantly salaries if you look at any IT company. So what they do is they provide a service in a month, they pay off the salaries, they bill the customer, and he will pay after 30 or 60 days. So the best possible product for them is to discount their customer's invoice. That's the only way it's going to work. He cannot go and take a LC or a TR kind of a facility. It's not going to be of any use for him. Yeah? So you need to pay attention to how you structure and use the right products for your business. Again, Yusan's days is the working capital cycle. The two speakers before me have spoken about it in detail. But you need to understand what is your business cycle, how much are your receivable days, your inventory, and you need to ensure that you have the right number of days available from the bank to repay the money. Yeah? Stretching it too tight is not good, and utilizing the money for an extended period when you don't need it is also not good, because you may end up using the money for some other reason other than the purpose for which it was borrowed. That's what I had mentioned earlier as well. Window dressing of balance sheet. It's an interesting word. I think one of the speakers mentioned that briefly. When you do not have a highly regulated environment, it's very easy to do that. But does that help you in the long run? 90% of the cases that I have seen, it has never helped anyone in the long run. Because you're just trying to show to a bank that I have this much of revenue, this much of profit, this much of assets, which you actually don't have. And then you're trying to borrow based on that. So a company might be able to do that and take the loan, but then you will not be able to repay it on time. Yeah? When the going is good, the accelerated cash cycle, you might be able to manage this. But the problem will arise when you look at a slowdown. Yeah? So I don't think, and we're getting into a tax regime next year, so in any case, this will become very, very tricky. Last point, not a very significant point, but very important as well for people to understand that as your business grows, you need to make sure that your auditors are approved by the banks that you're working with. Yeah? Because banks generally tend to have, I don't know whether I should call it a list of auditors or approved auditors or what, but yes, they have preference for certain, I would say let's not put it the preference, but certain auditors they might not accept, let's put it this way. Yeah? So at certain stage when your business is growing and your number of relationships with the banks are growing, you might want to look at this point and again, the best thing is have a conversation with your bankers, understand that am I on the right track, are these auditors okay in your list as per your recommendation and stuff. Yeah? So these were just a few points that I had in mind in terms of what you are trying to do when you're looking to raise bank finance. Yeah, you need to keep calm when you're raising finance. I think that's the most critical point. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to take if there are any questions.